Welcome to Pave's Garage. In this video, we're going to recreate this plastic fender liner out of carbon Kevlar. So if you've been following my build, some of you are probably wondering why I'm wasting my time recreating a fender liner out of carbon Kevlar when I have an entire ruined Pajero Evolution over there which needs a lot of time and attention. And the answer to that is somewhat logical, and that is that I've decided to create the roof and the bonnet out of carbon Kevlar because I think it looks kind of cool and something a bit different. But as you may know, carbon Kevlar has a bit of a reputation of being a fairly tough material.
Way to find out. Woo! It looks like that actually stopped a bunch because
it's a lightweight vest actually. There's no steel inside. A lot of Kevlar. Absorbed. It would have broken your bones in your chest, but the bullet wouldn't have gone through. I don't think. Let's see.
And with that toughness comes a few difficulties when working with it. It's extremely difficult to cut and extremely difficult to finish. So I decided to recreate this little piece here just as a bit of a tester before going on and recreating an entire roof and a bonnet. The technique I've used to create this part is just a really simple lamination technique where I just lay a bit of carbon Kevlar fabric onto the back of the piece, put some resin on it, pull it off, and then finish it off by hand.
That's what she said.
So whenever you're making a carbon fibre piece, it's really important to make sure that your mould is really clean and as smooth as possible, because any imperfections in the surface of your mould are going to be transferred into the carbon fibre. So because this is a pretty old plastic piece that had been sitting in the wheel well of a four-wheel drive for almost 25 years, I decided to give it a really good clean with some steel wool and then rub it down with some 600 grit sandpaper. I'm not going for a perfect surface finish, but this will at least make sure it's relatively smooth. Now what I'm doing is preparing the part with some release agent, just using some Miracle Gloss mold release wax here, which I'm just applying with a sponge applicator, putting on one layer, then allowing it to dry for about 10 minutes, buffing it off, and then applying another layer. And I go through that process 3 times. And here I'm just plugging up holes and then creating a flange using some release tape. This is to ensure that the resin doesn't sort of wrap around the entire plastic piece, which would then mechanically lock the carbon fibre piece onto the mould. And then with that done, I'll just give it a quick spray with PVC release film and trim the Kevlar to size, ready to start sticking it on with laminating resin. Now when you're laminating parts like this, you really don't want the part to be sitting on your workbench, you want to raise it off the ground. I usually do this with a cup just sitting upside down and use double-sided tape to stick the part onto it. And what this does is it prevents any runs of the resin from getting onto your workbench and then sticking your part onto that bench. So I'm just starting the laminating process by covering the part with a single layer of resin. And this first layer of resin is going to form the outer face of the part. So it's the part that everyone's going to see. So having this layer of resin put down first just helps ensure you've got a nice even coat on the outside of your part, and will also help you put down the cloth and ensuring that the cloth actually conforms to the shape of your original part. So I end up spending a fair bit of time just really carefully pushing down the Kevlar into all the corners and just helping some of that first layer of resin soak all the way through the fabric. Doing that as much as I can before I start applying another layer of resin before putting down the next layer of carbon Kevlar. So with the 2 layers of Kevlar down and all the cloth thoroughly wetted out with resin, I'll just leave it overnight to dry and then start the demoulding process. Well, that looks like absolute shit. So you can see here there's plenty of areas where the fabric hasn't actually stuck down completely into that first layer of resin, leaving a sort of bridging effect where you don't have that nice smooth layer of resin which is stuck to the fabric, and instead it's stuck to that original part. But that's really about as good as you can expect using a process like this, where there's no vacuum involved or anything actually forcing the fabric down onto the part that you're recreating. But thankfully it's pretty easy to fix just by laying down a little bit more laminating resin onto those sections and then giving it all a good sand. So once it was all sanded and looking a hell of a lot better, I cut it out using a Dremel tool with an extension shaft and a diamond cutter bit. The extension shaft will get the Dremel tool and its motor away from the carbon fibre dust, which is electrically conductive and generally will just destroy your electric motors. And the diamond cutter is essentially essential for cutting out Kevlar, as Kevlar will just blunten any other bits. And once it's all trimmed out, I think it looks pretty damn good. All it needs now is for the edges to be sanded and then some holes to be drilled. So this was my first time working with carbon Kevlar, and the major thing that I discovered in this was that when sanding the edges, the carbon fibre and the epoxy portions of the part will sand away really easily, but you end up being left with these frayed Kevlar edges because the Kevlar fibres are just so strong, an ordinary sander just will not get rid of them. The only real way to deal with it is to mix up a bit more resin and just paint the edges, let it dry, and then carefully sand it down, being careful not to get back into the carbon Kevlar fibres. And just like that, the first carbon Kevlar piece is done and installed on the car. So this was just a really quick, cheap, dodgy way of making a carbon Kevlar piece. If it was for a part that I wanted people to see, or if it was a piece that actually needed to be structurally sound, I'd be using a vacuum resin infusion technique or something like that, which you'll be seeing in the next video when I actually make the roof. But for a piece that's going to be hidden in a wheel well, I'm pretty happy with it. So, since filming and doing all that voiceover crap, one thing I discovered with finishing off the edges on carbon Kevlar pieces was that wet sanding them with 400 grit sandpaper will really help eliminate those frayed edges and just leave a far nicer finish. So that's something I've done since then, and yeah, glad I've done it. Wish I knew about it earlier. Anyway, that's the end of this video. In the next one, we're going to recreate the Pajero Evo's roof using carbon Kevlar. Using vacuum resin infusion, which is far more advanced technique, which gives you a far nicer finish compared to that.
Ooh, he card reads good.
So stick around for that one. You know, like, comment, subscribe, share, check out my website, pavesgarage.com. There's some cool stuff on there. I might actually have some stuff in stock by the time I upload this, maybe. That's all I got.